Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan Yaki, the director of the La Follette School of Public Affairs. Thank you for being here this afternoon. I'm here to introduce Katherine Gehl, who's a business leader, entrepreneur, and political innovation activist. Katherine was president and CEO of Gehl Foods Incorporated, a high-tech food manufacturing company in Wisconsin, where she led an aggressive and transformational growth strategy. In 2015, Katherine sold her company, in part to be able to dedicate more time to the issues of political reform. Over the past decade, Katherine has focused on the urgent need for nonpartisan political innovation and reform at the state and national levels. In 2016, Katherine invited Michael Porter of the Harvard Business School to join her in applying some of Michael's techniques and tools for understanding industry competition to the realm of politics. Together, they co-authored research and analysis on our political system entitled Why Competition in the Politics Industry is Failing America. Katherine's a former member of our board of visitors at the La Follette School, and she's currently a co-chair of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. In 2018, Katherine co-founded Democracy Found, a Wisconsin-based initiative dedicated to the implementation of political reforms at the state level. Today, Katherine's going to tell us about some of this exciting work. Before she does so, I want to let you know that there's going to be a reception afterwards. Please join us. And there's going to be a short amount of time for Q&A. So Katherine will take some of your questions. Please help me make them questions. And also, please make them relatively short. We want to get to as many people as we can. So with no further ado, here's Katherine.
Thank you so much, Susan. I am super happy to be back at La Follette, a little afraid of falling off this stage. So if I'm getting really interested in what you guys have to say, someone push me back. I super enjoyed my time at La Follette and was able to give the commencement address a couple of years ago, which was, I need to thank all of you, the inspiration for naming my son. I was 9 months pregnant at the time of that speech and used a quote from Teddy Roosevelt in the speech, and therefore my son has the name Teddy because of La Follette. So hopefully that will make him happy. What I'd like to do today is start with a couple of Venn diagrams and a little bit of oversharing, which is to say this is my biggest personal problem. There is no intersection between eating what I love to eat and being healthy and energetic. My other problem is son Teddy, who, even though he's over a year now, is still up. I'm sleeping in the closet now. It puts more doors between me and him. And no intersection between that and being well rested. But here's the problem that we all share, a foundational problem. There is currently, in our system, no intersection between acting in the public interest and the likelihood of getting reelected on the part of our elected officials. In other words, if America's representatives do their jobs the way we want and need them to, they're likely to lose those jobs. So we have to think about that. But fortunately, even though my personal problems seem relatively intractable, this one, believe it or not, we can fix. And to understand how and why today's political competition diverges so sharply from the public interest, we, my colleague Michael Porter and I, have used tools of analysis and theories that have been employed for decades as the gold standard to understand competition in for-profit business industries. It turns out that using these tools to look at politics sheds new and interesting light on the failures because politics has become a major industry in America that functions like other industries. And our political problems aren't attributable to a single factor, but rather to a failure of the nature of the political competition that's been created. This is wholly a systems problem. We vowed right from the start that we didn't want to simply add to all of the depressing commentary about politics, but rather to use everything that we did to drive towards figuring out how to change the system powerfully enough to change the results that the system would reliably deliver. So today, let's explore the failures and then get right to a comprehensive strategy to fix them. Surely, many of you have engaged over time in this typical Washington is broken conversation. You know the one. Someone references one of our huge problems, a long-standing problem, and talks about the widely shared potential policy solutions. La Follette people would call it some evidence-based policy solutions to that problem, and then bemoans the total lack of action thus far. All because, as we say, Washington is broken. And yet it turns out that this actually represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the problem. My good friend, Mickey Edwards, a former congressman, noted this a number of years ago. Washington isn't broken. In fact, it's designed to do exactly what it's doing. It's delivering exactly what it's designed to deliver. And the rational question then is, so how could it be so perfectly designed and yet deliver such dismal results? And the answer is that it's really not designed for us, the citizens, the public interest. In fact, when you look at it, we will see that the system was actually custom designed, optimized, fine-tuned, tweaked, maintained over decades by and for the benefit of two private gain-seeking organizations, which are our two political parties and their industry allies, what together comprise what we now call the political industrial complex. And currently, this is the only constituency that really has a say. Our confusion is that we've been assuming, and I think naturally, that this system, our democracy, would have been designed for us. But unfortunately, a quick peek under that proverbial hood will show us that the system doesn't really work how we've mostly assumed that it works. So I'm going to give you two quick real-life examples. So first, I'd like you to think back to 2008, and Joe Biden becomes vice president, and his Senate seat is now open in Delaware. At the time, everybody in Delaware knew who would be the next senator from the state of Delaware, and that was Mike Castle, most popular politician in the state, multiple-term governor and congressman. And he ran in his Republican primary, and he lost. Now, this is shocking, but not really an insurmountable problem because the real election's in November. So Mike Castle is revered in Delaware. He can theoretically turn around and put himself on the ballot in November when he would have won. But none of us have ever heard of Mike Castle, Senator Mike Castle. And the reason is because Delaware has a rather odd law, and it's called the soreloser law. And what that says is that if you run in your party's primary, Democrat or Republican, and you lose, you're simply not allowed to have your name on the ballot in November. A good question to ask is how many states have a crazy law like this undemocratic sounding soreloser law of Delaware? And the answer is 44. And we're sitting in one today. Now, some of you might remember in 2006, Senator Joe Lieberman in Connecticut lost his Democratic Senate primary. But you continue to see Senator Joe Lieberman in Congress because Connecticut was one of then only 4 states in the country that didn't have a soreloser law, and he went on the ballot as an independent and won in November, proving that that's who the voters of Connecticut wanted. And yet in any other state, in almost every other state, that simply would not have been possible. Now, there's a few other things that we have to really get clear about partisan primaries. They might be publicly funded, but when you think about it, they're actually a selection process for the standard bearer of a private organization. Primaries are also the reason that so many people show up at the general election and think, oh, I really don't like these choices that I have. Because as most of you know, so many elections are really decided in the primaries, especially in gerrymandered districts. And voters who turn out for the primaries often tend to be more ideological than the electorate as a whole, forcing the candidates to go further to the right or the left than many voters as a whole really want. But even more alarming the influence of the partisan primary extends to actual governing. So imagine yourself for a moment as a politician, and it's not just what you have to say to get elected in that process. It's when you now have been elected, you're in Washington, D.C., and you are, let's say, presented with an opportunity to sign, to vote yes on bipartisan compromise legislation for one of these enormous problems that we have. What are the operative questions that you've got to ask? Is this a good idea? Is this the right policy for the country? Is this going to work? Is this what the majority of the constituents in my district want? It's none of these. What you have to ask is, can I make it back through my partisan primary if I vote for this? And if the answer to that question is no, or even bordering on no territory, then unfortunately the answers to all those other questions are virtually wholly irrelevant because the rational incentive to get reelected directs that you will vote no. Occasionally, duty and principle and sort of the answers to those aforementioned questions of conscience might win the day and you'll decide to vote yes anyway. But then what happens? Your side doesn't want you to do that, and you can be threatened with a primary. I know you guys know that primary isn't just a noun anymore. It's become a relatively terrifying action verb in politics, and it says, we're going to primary you. And for Republicans, of course, this means we're going to primary you with someone further to your right, and for Democrats, it means we're going to primary you with someone further to your left. Never has it meant that we are going to run a more rational, consensus-oriented, solution-oriented, problem-solving individual to the middle. And partisan primaries combined with partisan gerrymandering are key tools that the two parties use to control the elections process. And they effectively force elected officials both right and left. And this makes it very difficult to govern. I want to break for a moment here to note that there is absolutely nothing in our entire analysis that suggests that moderates are the only kind of valuable elected official. In the history of our country, many advancements have come from ideological extremes, and we do not suggest that everything should come into a squishy middle. But having said that, in a democracy, eventually, to move the country forward, change must be enacted in our democratically elected bodies, and we have to bridge and come together to take ideas from both sides to move the country forward. And it is precisely in these bodies where moderates have essentially been hollowed out, and our ability to bring together people from both sides has been dramatically diminished. The second example of a partisan system, and this one isn't from elections, it's from actual governing. And this is where we see that the duopoly, what we call this two-party system, also perverts governance by controlling the legislative machinery, our term for the rules and practices of how the legislating process unfolds. The Hastert rule, for example, is a particularly egregious example of partisan control taking precedence over the legislature's ability to work collectively, even when the country wants it. So the Hastert rule has become a well-accepted practice of the Speaker of the House. And what it says is that the Speaker of the House will not permit a floor vote on legislation unless a majority of the majority, which is to say a majority of the Speaker's party, supports that legislation, even if a majority of the entire House would vote to pass it. So unless speakers ignore this practice, which they do from time to time, but rarely, legislation supported by a majority of the House or a majority of the country has no chance of passing because there'll never even be a vote. Let's think back to the shutdown before the last shutdown, so 2013 shutdown. That shutdown could have ended early or been entirely averted if then Speaker John Boehner had allowed a floor vote on legislation that had been passed by the Senate and was supported by a majority of the House, which is to say virtually all the Democrats and a minority of Republicans. And in fact, The shutdown ended only when Speaker John Boehner broke the Hastert rule and broke with his party to allow the vote. Effectively, this made-up rule cements majority party control in a legislature that is supposed to represent all U.S. citizens, and it allowed, in this case, a small number of extreme partisans to hold the entire country hostage in that particular shutdown for 16 days. So think about it for a moment in the context of your own organizations. If you are committed to solving your biggest problems, I suspect that one thing you might not be likely to do is to assemble everybody and say, oh yes, but before we get started, let's count off by twos and divide into warring teams, and then we'll get straight to work. But that is Washington, D.C. every day. Our founders warned against political parties, virtually all of them. John Adams said, in a prescient quote, "There is nothing which I dread so much as the division of the Republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader concerting measures in opposition to each other." Clearly, we can see that politics doesn't really work the way Schoolhouse Rock originally taught me that it did. My daughter, who is 13, describes the situation best. She has to listen to me all the time, so she has a joke, which I promised I'd share with you. If con is the opposite of pro, then isn't Congress the opposite of progress? And so let's give her credit. The U.S. political system is not a public institution. The political system, the government is, the political system is not. It's a private industry, and it's a classic duopoly. And in the duopoly, the players advance their own interests instead of the public interest. And what's unique about the politics industry as compared to virtually every other industry is that there's no independent regulation. The actors in the industry are the ones that themselves make the rules of the game. Most people mistakenly think that the key rules of the game are in the Constitution, but for the most part, it's not true. It turns out that the majority of the rules that govern day-to-day incentives and behavior in elections and in legislating are set by the political industrial complex and for their benefit. As is always the case in life, the rules of the game affect the way the game is played and affect the outcome of the game. And the net result of the rules of the game in the politics industry is unhealthy competition. And the result of unhealthy competition in any industry is that customers in that industry are not well served. So thus, we reach a point where the actors in the political system are thriving, while the American public has never been more dissatisfied. Just last fall, a new Gallup poll came out showing that 61% of Americans think that a major new third party is needed. And the percentage of Americans self-identifying as independent is at an all-time high as of last July, 43%, which is much greater than the 29% saying Democrat and 25% saying Republican. In any other industry this big, with this kind of consumer dissatisfaction, you would see a new entrant, an entrepreneur viewing it as a phenomenal business opportunity, and this new entrant would come into the market in order to deliver to that market what's missing for the consumer. But that doesn't happen in politics, because as I'll show you in a moment, the duopoly works very well together in one particular way, and that is to collude together to rig the rules of the game to protect themselves jointly from new competition. They erect what we call huge barriers to entry. Put another way, politics isn't broken, it's fixed. So therefore, instead of results in the public interest, instead we get gridlock. This chart shows the percentage of salient issues that are deadlocked in Congress. We see a relentless increase from 1947, leading to a high water mark of 74% of important issues gridlocked in 2014. And when we do get something done now, it's generally partisan. This slide shows a striking implication of the industry structure, which is to say landmark legislation used to pass with bipartisan support. You'll see the combination of red and blue starting on the left for Social Security, highways, civil rights, welfare reform. But today, important legislation is passed only on partisan lines. So you'll see all blue for health care and Dodd-Frank, and all red for tax cuts. And when the other party retakes power, it focuses not on improving, but on repealing. This happens in part because, as I noted before, there simply aren't many moderates left who can bridge the gap between the two sides. Here we see the decline in moderates over time in the House on both the Republican and Democrat sides. And everyone knows it's broken. Look at the dramatic decline in public trust in the federal government from 1958 to 2017. Now again, if the competition in the politics industry were healthy, industry actors would be competing to deliver value for the customer, to advance the public interest, and they would also be held accountable for that. But we know they're not. And the question is, meaning they continue to thrive even when there's no customer satisfaction. And the question is, why not? So to understand how and why today's competition diverges sharply from the public interest, we use these tools of industry analysis to understand the drivers of competition. And these are very common, as I mentioned, to use in business, but new to politics. And by looking at how politics works as an industry, we can examine what's causing the outcomes we see and why they've been getting worse, and we can figure out what we could do to alter it. This framework, often called the 5 forces framework, looks holistically at the forces that drive competition. If anybody in this room got their business degree, they would have studied this. It is taught in every business school in the country as well as around the world. Here's a quick overview of 5 forces. So at the core of competition in any industry is always the rivals. So it could be Coke and Pepsi, could be General Mills, Unilever and Kraft. And in the politics industry, of course, the rivalry is between the political parties, Republicans and Democrats, who compete. And they compete in two ways, to win elections, and they also compete to pass legislation. But competition also involves more than just the direct rivalry. There are also surrounding actors. Every industry has suppliers providing the key inputs. And in politics, these are the inputs necessary to campaign and govern, like campaign staff, lobbyists, think tanks, voter data, and candidates. And every industry has customers. Politics has us, the American citizens, but politics also serves other customers, among them donors, special interests, and partisans. Rivals reach customers through channels, such as the media. A critical dimension of every business, on the bottom here, is how hard it is or not for new competition, what we call new entrants, to enter the industry. And this depends on the strength of the barriers to entry. So in politics, a new competitor could be a new party. And finally, every industry always has substitutes. Substitutes are ways of competing that are different from the way competition's been structured in the past. So think of Uber to taxis or Amazon to retail. In politics, substitutes could be independent candidates who weren't affiliated with traditional political parties. Using this lens, we can actually understand the root causes of dysfunctional competition that we're experiencing. The analysis is, despite the simplicity of the chart, phenomenally complex and also super long, but I hope you'll read it. We will have copies of the report at the end, and it's also available online. But for today, I just want to focus on 4 key points. First, the politics industry is a duopoly, which is an industry with 2 dominant competitors. Second, in this industry, customer power is misplaced. The most important customers are not voters. Savvy businesses always prioritize their most profitable customers, and the political duopoly naturally does the same. It chooses to prioritize the customers that most advance its interests, and the average voter and the public interest are not, therefore, the priority customer. Because voters only have 2 choices, unlike anything you could buy in a store where you're going to have tons of choices, the duopoly doesn't need to actually deliver results for them to win elections. Essentially, general election voters are taken for granted Non-voting citizens are virtually completely ignored, and the duopoly is free to focus on serving special interests, donors, and partisan primary voters. Recent research supports this conclusion about where customer power actually lies. So there was a study in 2014, researchers at Princeton and Northwestern University examined congressional action on 1,179 policy issues. And their sad finding, and I'll quote it for you. When the preferences of economic elites and the stands of organized interest groups are controlled for, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact on public policy. That one always gets me, that that's where we've ended up. Third point I want to make, the duopoly has co-opted and gained control of key suppliers in this industry, as well as many of the channels for reaching voters and accessing political information, which amplifies the partisan competition. So campaign consultants are either Democrat campaign consultants or Republican campaign consultants. Pollsters are Democrat pollsters or Republican pollsters. Fox News is on the Republican side, MSNBC considered on the Democrat side. If you want to run anything other than a Republican or Democrat campaign, you can't find someone to work with you because they will never work again in their chosen industry. Finally, these barriers to entry, and that is one, are extreme. There are incumbency advantages, the control of suppliers and infiltration of channels that we just mentioned, and the election and governing rules like the soreloser laws that we talked about. You will not, for example, and unfortunately be surprised to know that the duopoly has come together to create fundraising rules that permit any one of you, if you would like, to give $847,000 every single year to either the Democrats or the Republicans or both if it serves your interest. But if you would like to donate to an independent campaign committee, you are limited to $5,400 every 2 years. That's it. So these very high barriers to entry make it phenomenally difficult for new entrants like a major third party to emerge. And it's no surprise that we haven't had a meaningful new party since the Republican Party was founded in Wisconsin in the 1850s. It's no surprise that substitutes like independents have had negligible success. This looks, when I speak to business audiences, what I do all the time, someone comes up to me after all the time and says, oh, we have to file an antitrust case against this duopoly. And then we note that I agree, it's promising, we looked into it. But as you might expect by this point, ever so conveniently, antitrust regulation does not apply to the politics industry. And troublingly, there's no accountability for any of this. There's no accountability because the customer only has 2 choices. So the only thing each party has to do to win is to convince the voter to choose them as the lesser of 2 evils, or to choose them because at least they say, therefore, what that voter believes. But what the parties don't have to do in a duopoly with high barriers to entry is deliver results, because no matter how disappointed you are, you still likely prefer what your party says, therefore, than what the one other choice says, therefore. So therefore, instead of results in the public interest, we get gridlock and dysfunctional drama. So I said I wasn't going to simply add to depressing commentary, which I will say we're almost to the optimistic part, but first a quick story. 2 young fish are swimming along when they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, and he says to them, he nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" They continue on in silence for a moment until one turns to the other and says, "What the hell is water?" The point is, it's easy to forget that what surrounds us is normal only because it's all we know. To others, these surroundings might seem pretty strange. And our political system is, to us, like water to the fish. We think it's normal, that this dysfunction is to be expected because it's the only thing we've ever known. So we complain about it, and a lot, but without fundamentally questioning the system. Because we don't really think it's possible that it's going to change. We think it's normal that in 2010, Mitch McConnell, then Senate Minority Leader, says his top priority is to make Obama a one-term president. We also think it's normal that Nancy Pelosi, when she became Speaker of the House the last time, said that her top priority was to elect more Democrats. We think it's normal that our own Speaker Paul Ryan, when he was leaving last year, said, I quote, "Both left and right play on people's division and exploit their frustrations for political gain, not good, all to get a coalition that's 50% plus one." And we think it's normal that both parties have, in turn, killed bipartisan immigration deals for political calculus. We think it's normal that $1 billion is invested in a lobbying index of companies that get the most bang for their lobbying buck, and that this index has outperformed the S&P for over a decade by almost 5 percentage points annually. We think it's normal that the richest country in the world has its credit downgraded in 2011 because of partisan political gamesmanship. And we think it's normal that you can donate 313 times more money to Republicans and Democrats than to the independent candidate. We think it's normal that only Republicans and Democrats can appear on a presidential debate stage. We think it's normal to have only two choices, and we think it's normal not to like either one of them. It seems normal because it is usual, but let me be clear, we should be outraged. This is really no way to run a country, and the good news is that it doesn't have to be like this because, as the title of our presentation says, political innovation will save us. Every other industry that we all work in, we all know that innovation is the key to success, and yet for some reason, we have left innovation to the sidelines, even though America was originally founded on the greatest innovation, political innovation of modern times. So I want to summarize the theory of change. In any game, sports games, board games, or serious games like politics, the rules of the game affect the way the game is played and affect the outcome of the game. So you can change the rules of the game in any human endeavor, and you will get different behavior. You thus change the way the game is played and you alter the outcomes. Remember, most of the rules aren't in the Constitution. They are absolutely made up. Our work has a comprehensive reform strategy that has 4 pillars, but today I want to talk about the most powerful reform that we can achieve much sooner than most of us think, and also something that's in our control for our state right here. We absolutely must re-engineer the elections machinery, the way our elections are run. Because I want to step back for a moment, there's 2 critical structural problems with our existing elections. First, the partisan primaries that we already talked about. Partisan primaries create an eye of the needle problem, which makes it almost impossible for legislators to keep their eye on the public interest instead of the ideological wing of their party. And the second problem is plurality winner elections. So in the US, elections can be won with only a plurality. The winner has the most votes, but not necessarily a true majority. So for example, you can win a 3-way race with 34% of the vote, meaning that 66% of the voters preferred someone else. Plurality voting is an enormous barrier to new competition for 2 reasons, and you've heard of these. First, the spoiler argument. So sometimes we don't vote for the candidate that we really want out of fear that we will inadvertently contribute to the election of the candidate we like the least. So for example, you may not vote for Jill Stein because you will take votes away from Hillary and accidentally help elect Donald Trump. And you may also not vote for Gary Johnson because you will take votes away from Trump and inadvertently help elect Hillary. Second, the wasted vote argument. Whenever we want to vote for someone who's not considered likely to win, you're told that you're wasting your vote. So either you don't do that, or people just stay home and don't participate. And both the spoiler argument and the wasted vote argument are wielded against all potential competition to the duopoly. And these arguments are a key reason why we don't have healthy competition. they're a key reason why most potential new competition never makes it to the starting line, because they have a few meetings with campaign consultants in secret, and they quit before they get started, once they understand the uphill battle of running in any way unaffiliated with the duopoly. The two elections innovations that we propose solve both these problems. And our election innovations do not simply say that the solution is new and different. The solution also is Democrats and Republicans reinvigorated in a system of healthy competition. So when implemented as a package, our election reforms will fundamentally change what politicians are incented to do. Elections machinery innovation number one is to institute what we call 4 forward primaries. And here's how that works. Let's just eliminate the partisan primary, and instead, when you go to the voting booth for the primary, there's only one ballot, and all candidates running are on the same ballot, whether they're independents, Republicans, Democrats. You vote, and the top 4 vote getters advance to the general election. 4 forward primaries eliminate the eye of the needle problem and allow legislators significantly more leeway to legislate in the public interest. Then election machinery reform number 2 is to institute ranked choice voting in general elections. And here's how that works. Now, consider you have these top 4 finishers from the primary that are on the ballot in the general election. And now you show up at the election, you see your 4 choices, and it's easy. Pick your favorite, just like always. But then, if you would like, you can also pick a second choice, third choice, fourth choice. You can rank as many or as few as you want. So here's an example of my ballot in a ranked choice voting election. So I love the musical, so I am going to vote for Alexander Hamilton. And then, George's a pretty good guy, so he'll be my second choice. I've got Thomas Jefferson third, and James Madison is my fourth choice. After an election like this, the polls close. The first place votes alone are counted. And if someone gets a true majority, then obviously the election is over and that candidate wins. But if the leader among first place votes falls short of 50%, then technology enables instant runoff voting. The last place candidate, the fourth place candidate, is automatically eliminated. And if you had selected that candidate who's now out, your second place vote is counted instead. The votes are counted again, and the process continues until you have a true majority winner. It's basically a series of runoffs, but instead of having to keep coming back for another election, you cast all your votes at once. Ranked choice voting eliminates both spoiler and wasted vote arguments and ensures that we will always elect the candidate with the broadest appeal to the most number of voters. These are not, by the way, crazy new ideas. Australia's voted this way for a century, and back in 2002, Alaska had a referendum where ranked choice voting was on the ballot. And at that time, a famous politician recorded one of those robocalls supporting ranked choice voting. It's a little bit cut off, so you'll just have to recognize the voice because you won't hear the identification.
I'm going to urge your support for ballot measure 1 on August 27th. As a presidential candidate and as a senator, I've worked hard to open up the political process for all Americans. Ballot measure 1 will adopt a fairer voting method. It will lead to good government because Alaska will elect leaders who have the support of a majority of voters. Please vote yes on measure 1 on August 27th.
The prize to those of you who identified Senator John McCain. And also, gets even better because in 2002 we have Illinois Senate Bill 1789, which proposes ranked choice voting for all statewide and congressional primaries. And the sponsor, then Illinois State Senator Barack Obama. John McCain, Barack Obama, 2 principled, talented politicians, devoted public servants who knew exactly how the game is played. They were ahead of their time on reform. But this reform, the time for this reform has now come. And in Wisconsin, even our political parties have already adopted it when they want to get things done in their own organizations. The Republican Party uses runoffs, which is essentially the same thing as RCV, in their endorsement process in their convention. And the Wisconsin Democratic Party just recently moved to use RCV to elect their party officials because, and I quote from the resolution, they want to make sure they have majority support. Together, these reforms, open top 4 primaries, so 4 forward primaries, plus RCV general, will powerfully alter the incentives. Let's reimagine Congress post-election machinery reform. Now when a member of Congress is presented with that same opportunity to sign a bipartisan bill, which will not include exactly what they want. And it also won't include exactly what any one of us wants, but it will be a bill like what we saw on welfare reform and civil rights and Social Security years ago, where we come together as a country and move forward. And when they see that bill this time, they can vote yes if it's in the public interest. They can say, well, under the old system, I never would have made it back through my primary, but under this system, I think that I can be in the top 4. I mean, I'm super well known, I'm the incumbent, I've done a good job, I'll be in the top 4. And then in the general election, with a combination of first and second place choice votes, together, I will craft a win. Elected officials now owe their election to a broader group of voters in their district, and they are incented to be responsive to the entire district, rather than a narrow swath of primary voters and special interests. The existing incentives for scorched earth campaigning are reduced, and most importantly, the barriers to entry are dramatically lower for new competition, leading to healthy competition to serve the public interest. And this system doesn't just change who gets elected. In fact, in many cases, it won't change who gets elected. It changes what they're able to do when they're elected, and it changes the debate while we are, having the election. And it forces different choices into the public. If you go back to the last time we had a major independent candidate have success in 1992, it was Ross Perot, who got 19% of the vote. He didn't win a single electoral vote. But it was Ross Perot's 19% and all those charts about the debt and deficit that he put on TV during that cycle that gave the political will to the Clinton administration and the other Republicans and Democrats who got reelected, who wanted that 19% for themselves, to deliver the last balanced budgets that we've had that are such a success of the Clinton administration. Competition did that. So let's go back to our Venn diagrams. You'll remember this one. Under the current rules of the game in politics, there's virtually no intersection, no connection between acting in the public interest and that likelihood of getting reelected. But here it is with the solution. We implement the election innovations, the 4 forward and RCV, and create that intersection so that the actors in the politics industry are incented to do what we as a country need them to do, and that is the power of political innovation. So what's next? Well, we need to pass these reforms around the country. The U.S. Constitution delegates virtually everything about the elections to the states. So each state is going to have to change these rules individually, and there's 2 methods for that. 26 states can do it with a referendum, and the rest of the states have to pass legislation, and that's what we have to do in Wisconsin. These efforts are in early stages around the country. Give you an example, Maine became the first state in the country to pass ranked choice voting on June 12th, less than a year ago. I actually woke up my daughter, who was 12 at the time, after midnight to tell her that it passed at her request, because she knew, because I told her, that it was the most consequential election of her life so far. Campaigns are being created across the country, including right here in Wisconsin. Susan mentioned that I co-founded the organization called Democracy Found with another Wisconsin CEO, Austin Ramirez of Husco, and the executive director of our Wisconsin effort, Sarah Eskridge, and a Follette grad, is here with us today. I hope you'll talk to her after. Our advisory council includes many names that you may recognize here, and wonderful folks across the ideological spectrum. We're a little Noah's Ark about that. When we launched this effort in May, we had a big event in Milwaukee, and two people stood up together. Lined Eline, who is one of the very largest progressive funders in the state of Wisconsin, and Andy Nunemaker, who is Republican, and he had a fundraiser at his home for Trump in 2016. And Lined is about here, and Andy's about here, and they stood up together and they said, you know what, we don't agree on much, but we agree on this. This is what we need to do for the country. So in Wisconsin, we need the state legislature to pass a bill and have the governor sign it. We're at work on that effort, and we would just absolutely love for you guys to join us. In fact, when I end, our last slide is going to show our website, and I hope you'll listen to the podcast, send the link to your friends, and sign up to be a part of our movement. To make it easier, we have been passing around, I hope they're going around, there are clipboards going around that you can sign up for information from us, or you can sign up when we're leaving. Oh, here come the clipboards, okay. Before we close, it's important to note, we do have many other challenges outside of the elections machinery. There are other reforms we should undertake. And our strategy has 4 pillars, and we only talked about one. But this is the necessary first mover. These election machinery reforms will enable others, allowing our system to improve over time. Historically, the American political system was a critical foundation of the United States' success. And today, it really is standing in the way of every important issue we need to address. Yet we have every reason to be optimistic, perhaps even profoundly optimistic, because our dysfunction is not a mystery, and we have more leverage in the system than we knew. This doesn't have to be the normal. As I said before, the country was founded on the greatest political innovation of modern times, and political innovation is the key to our future. I'd like to close with an invitation to action. Thomas Jefferson is said to have said, I work with my colleague at HBS, and the HBS fact checker says he did not really say this, but I like it. We don't have American government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate. And historically, for me, and perhaps for many of you, I really thought that meant I needed to participate by voting and maybe working for my preferred candidates, which I did enthusiastically. But it turns out it means that we all have to participate in the design of the rules of the game. So remember Benjamin Franklin, when he was leaving the Constitutional Convention, a woman asked him, so what have you given us, Mr. Franklin, a republic or a monarchy? And Benjamin Franklin replied, a republic, if you can keep it. Reclaiming the promise that is our republic, the United States of America, is the challenge of our times. And together, we can do this. So thank you so much for coming today. And I'd like to take your questions. Oh, I know this gentleman, Zach Brandon.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you. I love the idea that you could apply innovation and business principles to politics and make a difference. I guess my question for you is what do you have to say to the critics that say that instant runoff voting creates disenfranchisement, particularly those who are undereducated and immigrants, and it creates complication for people who are likely to not vote if they think it's too complicated?
So there is no perfect set of rules of the game. And we have to make choices about what rules we want to run things under. So initially, we implemented as a country partisan primaries as a reform designed to take the choice of candidates away from smoke-filled back rooms and give it to the people. And then over time, the industry actors optimized around that set of rules of the game and chose, and it turned out to be a problem. So there's no one perfect set, and it's possible that any rules you will make will be optimized over time for purposes that don't serve the public interest, and you'll have to adjust to them ongoingly. Constitution is reasonably immutable, but the rest is we need to be constantly vigilant. So there will be pros and cons to any set of rules of the game that we have. And my first question is, how are the current rules working for us? And they are not. So we cannot let a theoretical, mythical perfect be the enemy of the good. Now, as to those specific concerns, which is ranked choice voting, for example, could cause disenfranchisement because it's complex, or lower information voters would be, mystified by that system. That is a really great argument to bring up by the people who don't want us to have new competition. And it is not complicated the way they want us to believe. If you go to Maine, the fear campaign that was run against the RCV amendment, the RCV ballot initiative in Maine, that it would do those things, was enormous. And yet, the people in Maine passed it, and then the election ran just fine. And the reports out of Maine, and we'll have research on this later, but are that the voters are very satisfied. Will everyone be satisfied all of the time? No. They will be far more satisfied than they are under this existing system. I also would say we as people are super used to saying, this is my favorite, that's the one I hate, and these two, well, I'll flip a coin. It's really not super complicated, and I think that's a red herring on the part of the opposition to this kind of innovation in the system. Yes. Microphones? Who's? Okay. Let me see. This woman in the back. You? Yes. You?
I wondered if you could address the barriers caused by barriers to competition caused by how our election campaigns are financed.
Yes, so money in politics is a huge distortion of priorities in general away from the overall public interest towards the benefit of special interests. In our 4 pillars, the 3rd pillar deals with what reforms we recommend for money in politics. And they are primarily about transparency and lowering barriers to entry so that independents, could have access to the same kind of funding as well as small donor funding. I will say this, though. We don't place that as our priority because, believe it or not, it's not the most powerful thing we could do. Let me explain. You saw the incentives in the system. Let's imagine the unimaginable for a moment, that we could get a constitutional amendment that limited special interest money in politics dramatically, let's say by factor like 10 times less than what it is now. If we don't change the rules of the game and the incentives for re-election, what we will do is make it 10 times cheaper for self-interested money to get the same results they're getting now. We have to change the incentives around re-election and reduce the ROI that money gets. Money doesn't go places where it gets no return. This current dysfunctional competition is a system where that money has a really high certainty of getting the return that the donor wants from it. So the best way to lower money in politics is to reduce the ROI of money in politics, not to artificially restrict it. Additionally, we want to increase the power of small donors, and the most important thing is we want to make the currency of votes more valuable than the currency of money. So one of the things I didn't get into in the analysis here, but you can see it in our work, is that a really interesting thing about this industry that you don't see in for-profit industries is that we have these 2 currencies. Some customers pay with votes, some customers pay with money, but because the individual voter has actually so little power based on how the competition is designed and having only 2 choices, it allows the currency of money to be dramatically more valuable. And the answer is not to worry about that, but to make the votes more important. Look, if a donor wanted to give $10 million to someone, but that person couldn't get reelected, then that $10 million would be wasted or it wouldn't go in. Okay, yes, please, ma'am.
How do you feel this new system would be affected by or affect the current polarized media that's out there?
Yeah, so this is a really important question, the media. And I'd like to back up and say another thing you'll see in our report is how do we decide what the 4 pillars are? So I just told you, I decided about the elections machinery because of, there's such a fabulous adjustment to incentives. We don't put the same importance on money for the reasons I just explained, but the way to look at that is another Venn diagram. I think all of life works in Venn diagrams. So we drew powerful and then achievable. So we looked at all the possible reforms and said, are they powerful, by which I mean, do they address a root cause of the systemic dysfunction that we analyzed or not? And then the other one is, are they achievable? So even if they're powerful, they address the root cause, but it's a constitutional amendment. We haven't passed one in, 100 years. It's not achievable, so it's not in that intersection. So then we don't go after that. And specifically, I forgot already what you asked me about, though. This is terrible. Oh, yeah, media. Okay, great. Media, if we could change it, powerful. No question. If there were a way to get the closest thing to the real truth and facts out to all people and agree on what that set of facts were and, not to be incendiary, super powerful. It is not inachievable. So we have a choice. We can spend a lot of time talking about how horrible the media is and how it's the cause of everything, which will make no difference. That industry is thriving based on delivering what they're currently delivering. Or we can say, let's not spend our time talking about that, and let's get at the intersection of powerful and achievable and spend our time talking about and acting on the things where we actually have the ability to affect them, and that's where the change is going to be. So there are plenty of things that I wish were different that we can't change, so I'm not there. I'm on all this stuff at the intersection. Thank you. Yes, sir, at the edge here. Oh, and I think this might be the last one.
Thanks for taking the time to visit today. I've been involved with a number of local and regional candidates. And one of the things you see is the parties have a lock, especially in Wisconsin, because they've legislated that the statewide voter data list costs $10,000, which is insane. Other states, it's free to cheap. So why not take a page from the open source software world and just put the tools out there for anybody to run, full of data, full of fundraising, and it's free. That will change a lot. Because today, those candidates for small and regional offices, they go to the party to get the lists, and then they get sucked into the whole party game. So I'd suggest, given the money behind the names you have there, just do the software, get it out there, and that will change things quickly.
So we agree that the control of voter data by both sides of the duopoly is an enormously powerful barrier to entry. And one of the pillars of reform, the last one, is working to elect independents out and working to elect anyone who wants to run without being controlled by the duopoly. And there are efforts within that by organizations, one of which I'm on the board of, to get voter data that would be widely available to people who are running outside the duopoly. So I'm for all of that. Having said that, and I ran, a business here in Wisconsin for a number of years, a $250 million business. And one of the things that is super clear about strategy is, and I'll give you a quote from my co-author, who's the father of modern corporate strategy, Michael Porter. Strategy is about choosing what not to do. What that means is we have to choose our priorities. So I love that. And I want what you said, and I'm on a board of an organization that's trying to do that. But I will come back to say to those of you and all of us fellow Wisconsinites that the most important thing we need to do first, based on how this system works, is change the elections machinery. and that if we, those of us who care, get divided over all the different reforms that we might like to see instead of coalescing around something we want to do first, it's possible that our energy will be too divided to make the difference that we need to make. So I want to say thank you. There's going to be a reception. I'll be here. I'd love to talk to as many of you as possible. Please sign up. I did switch it. Or someone did for me. The executive director switched it. Okay, so please check out our website, and please join us, and thank you very much for coming today. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So I wanted to just close again, thank Katherine on our behalf. Partly this lecture was funded by something called our Fitch Fund, which is supposed to bring ideas from the free enterprise system and the business world to campus. How do you think we did today? Right? All right, let's have an engaging talk with Katherine over our reception. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.